Hello. Today's episode is about a man who many would say has saved more people's lives than any other person in history. If you enjoyed this episode, please click the like button and please click subscribe if you haven't done so already. That way you'll receive notifications of all the videos that I make. And why not share it with your friends? Okay, let's go. On May the 8th, 1980, the Assembly of the World Health Organization declared smallpox eradicated, and no cases of smallpox have occurred since. This was a first, the first time in human history that humanity had defeated one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, pestilence. Most people, including journalists, didn't fully understand the significance of what had happened. Neither did I, to be honest, but I was just out of my team, so I had an excuse. I suspect many journalists gave it little attention because nothing sells worse than good news. This incredible achievement was thanks to a global vaccination project that had lasted many years. Smallpox was a disease that was caused by infection of the variola virus. It primarily spread through respiratory droplets when an infected person breathed, spoke, coughed or sneezed, or in fact did anything. It could also be contracted through direct contact with bodily fluids of the contaminated objects such as clothing or bedding. The virus was highly contagious and could be transmitted from quite a distance away. The symptoms of smallpox included fever, headache and severe back pain. After a few days, a rash would appear on the face and spread all over the body. It progressed into fluid-filled blisters. This process took about 2 to 3 weeks. The disease could be fatal in approximately 30% of cases. Even if you survived, the long-term complications of smallpox could include scarring, blindness, and limb deformities. It's estimated to have killed between 1 and 5 billion people throughout history. Now, it's all gone. Although this disease has been eradicated by a long vaccination process, vaccination itself, which made the eradication of smallpox possible, was invented nearly 250 years ago by an English country doctor. Edward Jenner was born in Berkeley in Gloucestershire in 1749. He studied medicine in London and went back to be a doctor in his home county of Gloucestershire. For the first years of his professional life, he was what was called a medical journeyman with no permanent home or surgery, and rode about the county on his horse, staying with relatives or with rich patients who were willing to put him up for the night. He was quite a dandy, always dressed immaculately on his visits, with his velvet jackets, silk shirts, long black boots and silver spurs. He was a familiar figure around the county. No mention is made of trousers, but we can assume he was wearing them. If he hadn't been wearing them, that mention would have been made. Anyway, it was not until 1785 that he bought his own house, where he established a surgery. It is now the Jenner Museum. You can see it here. Like many people of that period, he was an amateur scientist, or natural philosopher as they were called then. He wrote a series of papers about the natural world, and his work was so highly regarded that he was elected to the Royal Society and invited to go on one of Captain Cook's expeditions to the South Pacific. He didn't go, and perhaps that is a good thing for humanity, because he turned his mind to another problem. He became interested in contagious diseases, like smallpox, which were the scourge of the world's population at the time. Finding out how these diseases spread and finding out how to treat them had always been a challenge. For example, malaria was thought to have been caught by bad air, hence the Latin name malaria. He noticed that there was one group of people who never caught smallpox: the milkmaids. He observed that milkmaids who had contracted cowpox, a similar disease, did not contract smallpox. Milkmaids were known for their beauty and smooth complexions. In a world where so many people were pockmarked, Bearing the scars of smallpox, they were exceptional. Jenner thought this apparent immunity needed further investigation, so he looked into the medical backgrounds of a large number of smallpox immune milkmaids and discovered that all of them had previously had cowpox. He hypothesized that exposure to cowpox, the cow's version of smallpox but much milder, protected the milkmaids against smallpox. Lucky them. A primitive form of inoculation against disease was being tried at the time, but it was a bit hit and miss and very dangerous. Most doctors considered it to be useless and ineffective. Indeed, when he told his friends and colleagues about his ideas, he was ridiculed. He set out to test his theory. He took a sample of cowpox from a cowpox-infected milkmaid, Sarah Nelms, and injected it into an 8-year-old boy, James Phipps. Some weeks later, he exposed James to smallpox, but he found that he did not develop the disease. I don't think pharmaceutical companies would get away with such an experiment nowadays. He tried infecting James with smallpox on several occasions, but James was now immune. This experiment was the first successful use of a vaccination against a disease. He had to wait 2 years for another outbreak of cowpox to appear, and when it did, he repeated the experiment many times on a larger scale. It took about 10 years for his findings to be recognised. In 1806, the government awarded him £20,000, more than £2 million in today's money, for the most, as they said, important discovery in the history of medicine. By 1812, more than 1 million people had already been vaccinated, and the last case of smallpox was recorded in Somalia in 1978. Later in his life, he was a highly respected and admired doctor, and he was knighted by King George IV in 1821. The term vaccine comes from vacca, the Latin for cow, a fitting tribute to a man who saved so many lives. Jenner's discovery was revolutionary. The smallpox vaccine he developed saved hundreds of millions of lives and was instrumental in the eventual eradication of the disease. It was also the foundation for the development of other vaccines that have transformed the fields of medicine and public health and has improved the lives of all humanity. We no longer have to live in dread of disease in the way that our ancestors did. The recent COVID pandemic would have wiped out a huge percentage of the world's population without vaccines. I think that it's fair to say that no other human being has saved so many lives. Thank you, Edward Jenner.